Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay, and I have a special guest with me today. It's Pastor Amber Laffey from the Alexandria
Hello.
United Methodist Church here in South Dakota. Eric is off for a work trip this week, and so I had Pastor Amber join me for a very specific reason, which is that we are both doing the same Lenten series. So we didn't plan on that happening, but it has certainly worked out to be able to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. But with this being the first episode of the podcast after the start of the season of Lent, I wanted to have Pastor Amber on just to talk about just kind of some of the rationale behind this sermon series and just how the first week went. So let's go ahead and get into it. Good morning, Pastor Amber.
Good morning.
How are you
It's so
today?
nice to see you. Good. The sun is shining and it's going to be a beautiful South Dakota day. So I'm very excited about this.
There we go. Very cool. Well, for longtime listeners of the podcast, we usually do a little bit of an introduction. So I would love to hear more about, I know you guys mentioned that you served in Alexandria, but just would love to hear more about you. So tell our listeners and viewers about yourself, Amber.
I'm Amber, so happy to be here. And I am a pastor in Alexandria, like you said, but I am a commissioned deacon, which means I'm really passionate about being a bridge between the church and the world and connecting the two in new ways. And I'm very excited and passionate about that. And I have 4 kids ranging from age 16 to 6. So I have a sophomore and a kindergartner, and 8th grader and a 4th grader. So life is crazy that way. And then I have a husband who sells agriculture equipment that is constantly on the road, just always traveling and seeing the farmers. So life is busy and good. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Yeah.
Definitely. So part of Amber and I's relationship is that she is one of my camp co-conspirators. She was up at Minecraft camp with me last summer and is planning on being there again this summer, which is going to be awesome.
Yes.
Her son has been one of my campers in a couple of different contexts, and her oldest daughter, serves on our conference council of youth ministries. And I happen to be one of the adults on CCYM as well. So we kind of go way back in a lot of crazy ways. So
yes, I was going to say I'm very passionate about camping ministries, and actually I got asked to be on the camping
nice
committee council. I don't know. So I'm super excited to serve in that capacity as well. So
yeah. Yep. I had my stint on the CRC a few years ago, and I'm just glad to know there's great people on the Camp and Retreat Ministries Council. So very cool.
Very excited about that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is the season of Lent. We are fully embarked. We had Ash Wednesday on Valentine's Day. Were you guys able? I know there were some weather-related things in certain parts of the state. Were you guys able to do Ash Wednesday on Wednesday?
Yes, we sure were. Yes, it was. We left. I live about 30 miles away from my church in Parkston, and we left a little bit earlier, so we got there kind of before it got a little crazy. So we did still have service, obviously a few less because of the weather, and I don't blame them for not wanting to leave their homes. But I promoted it like what a romantic time to come and be reminded of our mortality and have ashes on your head. What could be more romantic?
Clearly, right? Like, who wouldn't want to do that on Valentine's Day? Yeah.
So I mean, I said it will be quick, so you still have time to go on a date. So it was good. So how about you? Did you get to do it?
Yeah, we did. Canton skipped all of that weather. We had a beautiful day, and then it kind of got weird afterwards. We got a little bit of a nuisance snow, but that was really about it. So we had a pretty decent sized service. We started out. We had our normal Wednesday night has Chi Alpha, so we have a meal at 5:30, and then the kids came upstairs and sang for a while, and they actually started the worship service with a song from our kids, which was awesome. They did a great job.
Yes,
We have
love
a
that.
wonderful adult that works with them. Our pre-K through first grade went downstairs for a lesson. And then second and third and fourth and fifth and middle school and high school stayed upstairs for the service. And so that was kind of a nice, way to, for them to understand what's going on, but still have some space to talk about,
Oh,
and we
yes.
did that earlier before the service started. We're like, this is what we're doing today, and it's going to be very different, but it's, here's the reason, the rationale behind it, kind of doing a little teaching on what Ash Wednesday is all about and why we do it. So yeah, we had a great service. Started this, the sermon series on the Lent with the Psalms. We're working through the book Pause by Elizabeth Caldwell. So I started out with
Yes.
Psalm 51, and then we transitioned to Sunday, which was Psalm 25. Amber, I'd just love to hear some thoughts around why did you pick this series for the season of Lent for the Alexandria United Methodist Church?
Well, I always love to go on Cokesbury before the Cokesbury is our what would you call it? It's our printing.
Yeah, our
official
denomination's publishing house. Yep.
publishing house. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, and I like to see like what's coming out, what's new. And I saw this now. I love the Psalms for a few reasons. I feel like they're so human, and I love how they express the wide range of human emotions. Now, I love to talk about feelings. I feel things deeply. I feel other people's things deeply. And so I just wanted to give my congregation this opportunity to see the humanness in scripture and to experience this, like, the worship, like exalting God, the like, God help me, and the God, I'm kind of mad at you right now. My life is terrible. And I kind of want them to see kind of the depths of the emotions and the things we can bring to God. And also, I guess I was going to say, I identify like as a creative person. And so I love just the kind of imagery and the creativeness in the Psalms too, to explore and dig into these songs or poems or, and then finding the kind of creative things to go with it, to experience on worship, and then also to give my congregation to experience throughout the week with images and songs and all of that. So that's kind of my rationale and what I really like about this sermon series.
Yeah, I feel really similar. I also really, really, really like the Psalms. Just the like you said, the broad expression of language. Like there's so many times where we get stuck in our prayer life of, well, I can't say that to God.
Yes.
Yeah, you can. You can because people have, and God's big enough to handle it. Like God is able to deal with a pissed off human. Like that's just all there is to it. God gave us these emotions and gave us, the free range to express them in helpful ways, before God. There's nothing that we can say that's out of bounds that God can't handle. And yeah, so I do like that this gives us language for that.
Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things that drew me specifically to this series, especially for right now at the Canton Church, is we're kind of doing a really big swing through prayer before we get to the resurrection. So we just got done doing the Lord's Prayer sermon series, and then this lended itself naturally to kind of an extension. So we did Lord's Prayer along with the Dynamite Prayer study from Stu Nilsson Kibbe and Roz Picardo.
Yes.
And then we're transitioning right into this, which is very focused on how do we express ourselves before God? How do we deepen this relationship that we have with God? And then every chapter, every week of Lent, Elizabeth Caldwell gives us a spiritual practice to like engage with throughout the week. Which I found was really, really important to give tools, and you're asking people to commit to it for a week. You're not like, hey, we're gonna do 60 days of labyrinth prayer. We're gonna do labyrinth prayer for a week, and you might find that labyrinth prayer isn't what makes your heart sing, because that's my story. Like I appreciate the rationale behind prayer labyrinths, but they're just not for Clay, and we just know that to be true now. But like next week it's writing a psalm and like learning how to express yourself before God in a written or a spoken form. But like every single week there is this real practical, like, here's how I can hold on to this. Here's what David's words in the Psalms now allow me to do as a result of that. To deepen my own faith and my own relationship with God as we prepare our hearts to experience the full power of the resurrection. So I'm really looking forward to how this sermon series is going to unfold. It's been great thus far. So yeah.
I should also say I'm training spiritual direction. So I do love anything that includes spiritual disciplines. I do think sometimes my congregation is like, yeah, we know. We know about spiritual disciplines. Right. So I'm kind of trying to say it without saying, like, here's a spiritual practice. And we have actually talked about labyrinth before. Sure. Prayer labyrinth. And I do love a prayer labyrinth. But yeah, I love the imagery of it. And then that sometimes we're in the center, that God's the center. Sometimes we feel like we're on the outside of the path, like we are far away from God, and we weave in and out and we're never off the path. And we are always connected to God in the center, whether we feel like we're out or we're weaving in close by. And I love how you're not like going in like this, but it's in close and then you're out again. And I just feel the imagery and the kind of like, it's okay. We're not always super excited about our faith and always feeling close to God. That doesn't mean that we're not still on the path or that we're still not connected to God. And so I love that, that tool that we have.
I do understand and appreciate like the ins and the outs and the weaving closer and the weaving further away, but still being connected, and definitely feeling that and experiencing that in my own life as well. So
walking one in real life, especially with a group of people, does get a little awkward. So I will. There's an awkwardness to it. So let me see. Oh, I was at an event that I got this beautiful clay one, which is really nice, which fits in the palm of my hand. Or just, did you give your congregation a paper copy of it?
I did.
Those are, I think that's great.
Definitely.
So those are, I would say if I could be on a path outside by myself, that would probably be great. But when you're with a group of people, it does get so weird. Just preface that if you
definitely
ever do it in person, it's a little different.
If you're with a group of people that you know well, it can still be super awkward. I did Higher Ground 2 years ago, and like part of that was going to the prayer labyrinth at Terra Sancta, which was gorgeous and wonderful. And I actually really did have a pretty positive experience doing that. But it was still just like, these are people that, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? She's moving faster than I am. Am I going to be in her way? Like I really had a really hard time of clearing my mind enough to really fully engage. So the sermon Sunday was Psalm 25, was this prayer of David. What direction did you take the sermon on Sunday, Amber?
Okay, so there's so many things. I always feel like I want to say this and I want to say this. I had a hard time kind of like, what is the one thing I'm going to focus on, right? Because we don't need 20 things. So I guess what I thought about, I started out talking about my husband and I going on this hike in the North Shore. And actually, these are pictures from it. The North Shore of Minnesota that we thought it was going to be this easy little hike. It was 3.5 miles, it said, but actually it wasn't a loop. And apparently you were supposed to turn around. And I don't have the picture on the wall, but apparently in the North Shore of Minnesota, you don't walk dirt paths. They put wood and wooden steps. And so we're going up and down stairs, like wooden stairs, up and down, and they're slimy and wet. And it was just not what we expected at all. And I use that imagery and thinking of, we were about to give up so many times because we're like, this is just awful. The thousands and thousands of steps that we walked, we were ready to give up. But it was like, okay, actually, this is a lot of what life looks like. It's like we're on these ups and downs. There's way more steps to get to the destination than we've ever thought. And so I really talked about the path of life. And the psalmist cries like, guide my paths, bring me to this place with you. And I just thought, so I wanted to, of course, give the assurance of like, this is how life is. It's not a smooth path. That's just a nice little loop. It's ups and downs. And then the other thing that I feel so passionate about in my ministry, whether I'm talking to you, Clay, someone I meet at the grocery store, or my congregants, is expressing that there is not, like, God doesn't have this one specific thing in mind that he's holding in heaven or wherever you picture God, this plan for your life that is, there's one thing that you're going to do, and God has it, and he's just waiting for you to figure it out. I've spent so many hours and times of my life being uncertain, being scared that I wasn't doing the right thing, trying to figure out what that thing was. I feel like God calls us to many things throughout our life, and and also that God just wants to be a part of the journey. No matter what classes we take, no matter what our job is, what we do and what we don't do, like, just let God be a part of that and guide our steps in that. Because God's not trying to trick us. God's not, and then lastly, I will say, I always like to mention that what God does require us, in Micah 6, like I always like to bring it back to that, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. And so I guess I kind of challenge my congregation to say, is what you're doing just? Is what you're doing merciful?
Sure.
Are you doing it humbly? Like, this is what matters to God. And this is what we're called to. And so I guess those are kind of the highlights of the things that I was really passionate about sharing.
Yeah.
And I also did, one last thing I shared was, I showed a picture of this hiker that was just like overloaded with things. And I said, friends, I know a lot of us come in our walk with God with these heavy weights, whether it's past experiences, thinking we've got it all figured out and we're loaded down and we are ready for whatever life comes at us. But Jesus wants to take that burden for us. He says, come with me, walk with me, do it how I do it, learn the unrushed rhythms of grace. Is that right? From the Message translation. I love that. When he says, take my yoke upon me. So those are kind of all the things that I tried to work together, and I hope it's lovely for my congregation. But it's just like that God is with us on this journey, and we spend so much time worrying about the very little details and whether we've got it right or not. So I think that's kind of what I wanted them to hear, and then to just this week spend time acknowledging God in the decisions.
That's awesome. I really appreciate the directions that you took that. That's great. Definitely. Yeah, I focused on like just, David in this time of being lost and like the Bible doesn't specify which particular time, which I think is so interesting.
Right.
Like I was,
Yeah.
because like a lot of the time when I preach the Psalms, I want to go back and dig into the Hebrew Bible. Like, where did this Psalm come from? What's going on in this instance? And a lot of times there are
Mhm.
those really clear one-to-one correlations, but this isn't one of those Psalms. This is just
Mm.
David in the midst of one of the seasons of being lost, of not knowing if
Mhm.
he's on God's path or not. And like, how often do we feel that way? You know, there are times
Yes.
where we think like we're on the right path, and then all of a sudden, oops, no, we're not, or we're on the right path and there's a detour, or there's something that throws us off the path. We get distracted because that happens. And so I opened up with
Yes.
a story like at the very start of worship, even before the sermon, I started by telling a story about being lost in Sioux Falls. I had printed off
Mm.
directions on MapQuest because it was in 2007 when this happened, and
Yes.
I took a
Yes.
wrong turn off the interstate. I got myself into a neighborhood where there was only one way in and one way out, because that happens in Sioux Falls all of the time. And
Mm.
I drove past this one individual's house who was out mowing his lawn. I drove past his house 5 times, and he recognized my vehicle by the fourth time. Before I finally called a friend and said, "Hey, I have no idea where I am, but I'm in Sioux Falls. You grew up here, so you can help me, right?" And she had no idea where I was either, because she is from the very, very north side of Sioux Falls, and I was kind of in the middle. I was kind of by Tut Hill, by off of like 49th
Yes.
Cliff. And so just we feel that way, that we're on the right path, or we don't know what path to go on. And yet David is saying to God, teach me. Your way is knowable, but it's not automatically just plain before us. We have to do the heart
Yes.
work of finding our way
Mhm.
onto the path of God. And then just staying connected to God as best we can in the midst of that, so that we are, so that we're walking in the right way. But it does take God teaching us. It does take God leading us. It does take that moment of
Mhm.
saying, I just can't do this by myself. I need
Yes.
help,
Mhm.
from God. And then because of the beauty of the God, of the beauty of the body of Christ, I need help from other people that know the way too. And so we get to be those people that
Absolutely.
seek help, and we
Yes.
get to be those people that also then provide help when we can. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
I told my congregation that don't forget, sometimes we are the answer to prayer. Because
Mm,
I mentioned that too, that we need God and we need the body of Christ. We need our fellow people to walk with us. And I said, don't forget, we are sometimes the answer to prayer.
mhm.
And, sometimes it's not, and sometimes we might hear God's audible voice telling us what to do, but sometimes we'll be in situations, or we'll be with people, or we'll be reading scripture, and something will come up for us. Um, and sometimes you might be that person. And so it's also important for us to be in prayer and to be on the path, so that God can guide our words when we are helping someone else. So I think that's a huge part of it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great.
Um,
Yep. Do you remember Mike Flowers from Spirit Lake? He was our director at
yeah,
Spirit Lake for a long
yeah.
time. He would post to his Facebook almost every day when he was directing Spirit Lake. His prayer was, "God, put me in the path of someone that needs to experience you today." And I think that
Mm,
that's such a, it's such a beautiful way of expressing that heart, acknowledging that we are sometimes the answer to someone's prayer. Yeah, and that God does
mhm.
indeed work in and through and in spite of us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
If I'm being honest, there's a lot of in spite of, but no, that's
Yes,
good.
I
That's good.
agree.
Cool. So next week is on seeking God's face, or the kind of the
Yes.
general title of the chapter in Elizabeth's book is just faces. Yeah. So you have any thoughts on where you're heading?
Uh, yeah. Let's see. I messaged you 2 days ago and I'm like, Clay, what are you doing? It just feels like this is so hard. Like,
Yeah.
we get into a theology lesson about God's face, like,
Hmm.
because there's so much. This one felt a little bit harder, but um, the author of the book and then a few other commentaries mentioned kind of the rhythm of this psalm. Of it starts out with praise and moves into different things and uncertainty, kind of like I was talking about before. But I think I'm really going to focus on, I'm going to talk about the rhythm of it and kind of try to make worship feel a little bit like that rhythm.
Sure.
But I think I'm really going to focus on, like, what does it mean to seek God's face? What does it mean to seek God? What does that look like in us, for us, whether you're a farmer, whether you are a teacher, whether you're a nurse, you know, you're a grandma at home with kiddos, like, what does it look like to seek God's face? And so my congregation, I always try to give very practical day-to-day things.
Yeah, definitely.
We're not a real heady congregation, if that makes sense. So
Sure.
I always think, and then I always think, like, does anybody, if this is the first time to church, so like this last week I spent a little bit more time than I would have liked explaining what Lent is, but
Sure.
I feel like it's necessary.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a handy, like, even lifelong Christians need the reminder every now and then of why we do what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's kind of like, okay, remember, this is what we're doing. So that's what I think we're doing this Sunday. So I'm way overthinking all of the songs like normal.
Yeah, that is the hard part of preaching the Psalms, is so many of them have been put to music. Yeah, I hear you.
Yes. But I did think, like, as I was saying before, like, I can give my congregation throughout the week. What I'm trying to do is post on Facebook. Like yesterday, I posted the image resource that the author had. And then today, I think I'm going to post the song. And then I figure there's got to be a painting or something I'll post another day. And then, you know, just kind of let's experience this in different ways.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, so much like you, I am focused on faces. That idea of what does it mean to seek God's face, and like one of the things I find interesting in the Bible is that, like, no one ever gets to see the face of God.
Yes.
You know, like as God is interacting with humanity in so many different places, like I think especially of Elijah having his little temper tantrum in the wilderness of just being like, this sucks and I want to die. And God's like, hey, cool, here's some food and take a nap. And by the way, I'm going to pass by. You can't see my face because, you know, you'll die and stuff. But, you know, what does it mean for us to earnestly seek after God? And so I liked how in the chapter, Elizabeth Caldwell started off by talking about the pandemic and just how hard it was to not see faces for so long, or not see faces without masks for so long. You know, and so since I moved to this appointment during the heart of that pandemic, I moved in 2020, and, like, you know, I didn't see a lot of faces for a long time, you know, and it was hard to connect with people in a lot of ways. And just, you know, as we think back on that time, as we reflect back and, you know, feel some of that pain of the things we missed out on during that time, you know, what does it mean for us now that a lot of that has passed? You know, how do we now seek each other? How do we seek God? You know, and just how does that, you know, how do we continue to build that firm connection between our desire to seek God's face with every part of our lives? So
the time that those Psalms were written, they knew, God's people knew that if God's face was turned towards them, they were being blessed. And if he said, my face is turned against you,
right,
watch out. And so how important it was for the psalmist, if it was David, that's a whole nother theology to it. Like, we just credit him to David, which is fine. We don't need to get into that. But like, that he was like, oh, show me your face, turn your face towards me. I need this blessing, and I need your blessing right now. And so also, like, okay, that was before God gave us the gift of the Holy Spirit. And so now I feel like it's more our job instead of, you know, God is present in everything. We have to be awake and aware that God is present. And how are we going to seek that out? How are we going to, you know, turn ourselves towards God's face? And And so maybe that's all completely wrong, but I like, it's up to us too. Like we can plead with God, but like, what are we doing
Right.
to turn ourselves toward God and to seek God? Instead of crying out like, God, come be with us. Well, like, what are we going to do that God's present with us?
Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to Sunday. You can join us here at the Canton United Methodist Church at 10 o'clock in person or live on Facebook Live. And then we do post the service to YouTube afterwards. And so we'd just love to have you engaged in worship this week. Amber, want to tell people where we can find more about either the Alexandria Church, or can you give us a little bit of a plug? Amber also has a podcast called A Cup of Joy, and I would love to hear more about that for just a quick second.
Yeah. Our Alexandria church does have a Facebook page. There's so many Alexandrias in the United States.
Yep.
And so when you are looking for it, find Alexandria, South Dakota. And I can't remember if it's in our name or not. That's what gave me pause there. But hopefully you'll find the correct one, which I can give to you. But yes, I have a Facebook show called The Cup of Joy with Amber, which I actually started at the congregation I was at during the pandemic as well, because I asked them, what do you need or whatever? And they said, we need you to give us hope. And because I couldn't spend face-to-face time like you were saying, I was like, what can I do to lighten up this heavy time where, we lost 6 members in a very short amount of time during that really icky height of the pandemic in South Dakota. And gosh, everything felt heavy. So I started, just being as ridiculous as I could, talking about Easter candy, Valentine's Day, sometimes serious things too, but that's how it kind of started. So it is not a serious time for learning. It is just for fun. And now my friend Tia it has joined me, and we're both busy moms of 4, so we don't make as much videos as we would like, but one is coming soon. So fun. If you're looking for laughter and not seriousness and a little bit of hope,
I dig it.
We're your gals.
That's awesome. Very cool. Awesome.
So,
well, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the Cut for Time podcast. I'm glad to have Pastor Amber with us. Thanks for joining me for this conversation, and just praying blessings over the rest of your Lenten season. Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.